Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners. Tonight we're going to be discussing a story that, for over the past weekend, has shaken Nova Scotia to its core. And it's one that continues to raise more questions than it provides answers. On the morning of Friday, May 2nd, 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack were last seen at their home in Lansdowne Station. It's a remote wooded area in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. Their mother and stepfather say they had a lazy start to the day, dozing off in their bedroom with their 16-month-old baby. But it wasn't the noise of the older siblings that broke their slumber. It was the silence. When they awoke, the house was empty. 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack were nowhere to be found. What followed was a massive, multi-day search involving helicopters, drones, search dogs, and hundreds of professional searchers. Yet at this point, over 4 days later, the only clue seems to be a single set of boot prints found just a couple meters from the home. In this episode of Nighttime, Madeleine Klein and I are going to walk through everything publicly known about the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan, and we're going to examine the many unanswered questions and inconsistencies that make this case even more concerning with each passing moment. So let's get into it. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, we're going to be asking the question on the mind of every Nova Scotian. Where are Jack and Lily Sullivan?
A desperate search is underway tonight in Nova Scotia. 2 siblings, aged just 4 and 6, are believed to have wandered away from their home on Friday morning and haven't been seen since. Police dogs and helicopters have joined volunteers on the ground in Pictou County, that's northeast of Halifax.
Police say multiple search and rescue teams, drones, police dogs, and 2 DNR helicopters are searching the area in Pictou County. The missing children are 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan. Police say the terrain and sheer size of the wooded area has created some challenges for those on the ground.
I have no information currently on any particular leads. Obviously, it's a huge wooded area with lots of potential. So we're just keeping all avenues open and ensuring we're covering off the entire area with a very structured search.
RCMP say there was no evidence of an abduction. Police say the children were believed to have wandered away.
We are going to keep searching. That's our job right now, and no one's stopping. We have lots of officers here on the scene that are parents themselves, and we can certainly feel for this family, and our priority is to bring these kids home safe.
Ms. Madeleine Klein, how are you doing on the other side of the country? From one coast to the other, how are you in Saskatchewan?
I'm pretty good. I finally, the vehicle debacle over here, I think is finally over.
Oh, that's right. You've been having car trouble and it's destroyed the last couple weeks of your life. It's okay?
Months of my life.
Okay.
Because not only my vehicle went, but my husband's did too. So many thousands of dollars later and lots of carpooling later, I think it's done.
Carpooling with coworkers or family or friends or?
Just my husband.
Did it change your relationship? Did that shake things up a bit?
No, but it did make me realize how much I like being a passenger and how much I like getting driven to work and picked up.
Oh, sucks to be him, I guess.
It does.
Well, I hope your car is running and everything is back to normal in your relationship once you start driving to work separately again. But that's not what we're here for tonight. We are here to discuss a story that one thing I avoid on Nighttime is generally stories about kids. That's my soft spot and my weak spot. I think it's yours as well. Ever since having kids, I've been that way. That's something I think I think that comes with parenthood. You know, I can hear a dark or a twisted story, but when it comes to kids, I just can't go there. It upsets me. I can even feel me describing that it upsets me. Hard to put into words.
Absolutely. I feel the exact same way. Cause yeah. And I hate saying it's different now that I have a kid, but it really is. It took me having a baby to of course, before her, these terrible stories were still terrible. But it's just different now. Yeah,
I feel like with parenthood comes this massive vulnerability. It's, as an individual myself, like before children, the worst thing that could possibly happen would be like somebody would like I would die somehow or somebody would kill me. When you have kids, the stakes are higher because more important than you is your children. So you have this huge ultimate vulnerability, and something about that it affected me for sure with when I became a parent. But through the podcast, I've always kind of shied away from stories involving children. But at the same time, when something happens in your part of the country that involves like a desperate search for two young children, this is something that the story we're going to be talking about tonight is something that has rocked Nova Scotia. Everybody is talking about it. Everybody is hanging on every little crumb of information or development or detail. And there's been very few, but what has come out is just a disturbing, worst nightmare type story that involves the disappearance of a 4-year-old boy named Jack Sullivan and his 6-year-old sister, Lily Sullivan. And it's a disappearance that is being treated at this point as if they just wandered off from their home on Friday morning. We're now recording this Monday evening. As the search continues to raise on, the best scenario, I guess, is that these two children have managed to survive in the dense forest that surrounds their home. They went missing from a rural part of Nova Scotia where I myself, as a 40-year-old who spent a lot of time in the woods, I would have had a hard go getting through the weekend without any, equipment or materials in the part of in the type of forest that these children are presumed to be wandering around in. But before we get into the timeline and all the moving parts to the story, let me just ask you, as someone on the other side of the country in Saskatchewan, has this story made it out your way yet? Are you seeing news about Lily and Jack Sullivan?
Oh yeah. Yeah, not only did you post something about it, but I've got lots of friends over. I mean, you're my friend too. But I've got other friends from the East Coast, and they've been posting stuff about it too.
Okay. Yeah.
So
here in Nova Scotia, it's like any news report over the last 3 days is going to start with this. This is the big story. It's what everybody is talking about. If I check my emails anytime in the last few days, it's only emails about this case. So I say that because it's hard to overstate how big of a story it is. And when a missing persons case really gets people talking, but when it's a missing child, then in this case where it's two missing children, I've been obsessing about it and following every development and been trying to get my hands on every bit of information possible. So I figured I would drag you into this, and this would be a good opportunity for you and I to talk through this case and at least present and discuss the main elements that are known at this point, 4 days into a quickly moving and developing case.
it's just a case like this too is, especially in this day and age, like you yourself included, the internet is such a great tool, but it's also such a toxic place. Like there's so much speculation and armchair detectives, and it's hard not to compare this case to previous cases that are similar. So
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is a lot of people are talking about this case online, and people are jumping to conclusions or finger pointing or
grasping at straws sometimes.
in this case, there's certainly a lot of fingers being pointed back on the family by people on social media. But let's go through the timeline of what happened or what we know, and then maybe we can make sense of why people are asking the types of questions they're asking online. So as I mentioned right off the top there, this involves the disappearance of two children, a 6-year-old named Lily and her younger brother, a 4-year-old, Jack Sullivan. They live in Lansdowne Station, which is in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. It's a rural area that's, I think it'd be about 2 hours outside of Halifax. But if you look at where their home is, it's the kind of area where it's like these long stretches of road through the forest, not like a subdivision or a neighborhood. It'd be like, a driveway with a house, then there'd be a little bit of woods before there'd be another driveway with a house, if you know what I mean, if you can relate to that kind of area.
Yeah. And I know I ask you this every time there's a Nova Scotia case, and I know you're not from this area, but are you familiar with this specific area?
Not Lansdowne Station specifically, although I probably drove through the exits that would lead that area. But I would know this area just as Pictou County, which is, I would have driven through there 1,000 times. But there'd be so many little place names that I never would have heard about and that most people would never have known. Lansdowne Station is one of them. But in the home where they live, it's like a mini home, or people would call it like a mobile home or a trailer on a piece of land, and it's the two children as well as their stepfather, Daniel Martel, and the children's mother, Malia Brooks Murray. Daniel and the children's mother, Malia, they've been together for about 3 years, and they have another child together, a 16-month-old. So in the home, it's Daniel and Malia, Malia's two children, Jack and Lily, as well as Daniel and Malia's other child, a 16-month-old. It's been said that they've been together for about 3 years, where Jack and Lily had only been living with them for just about the last 2 years, and I couldn't conclusively determine where the biological father of these two children are. There's a lot of rumors online about where the biological father is, potentially incarcerated somewhere. But I couldn't confirm that or corroborate it, so I'm not going to say that's the case. But all I can say is it doesn't seem like the children's biological father is, like, quote unquote, in the picture.
Well, and I imagine like he'd be the first one that they would question or like look for. You always go for the biological parent. So,
but regardless, you have the mother and her two children, the stepfather, and then the baby that the mother and the stepfather had together in this home. And we'll jump right into the story now. Let's jump back to the 2nd of May, this past Friday. We're recording this now on Monday the 5th. So this story takes place just 4 days ago. The actual disappearance, it's pretty simple as far as how it all plays out. And I think you yourself, being the mother of a young child, of a baby, maybe you can relate.
A 16-month-old, actually.
Oh, that's right. So maybe you can relate to this, because Friday morning, Daniel and the children's mother, Malaya, were laying in bed with their 16-month-old baby. And it said they were just kind of dozing off. So it seems like they were kind of sleeping in, probably co-sleeping with the baby, just laying in bed, half awake, falling in and out of sleep. And they could hear Lily and Jack out in the kitchen in the other part of the home. So they could hear them like milling about. They knew the other kids were awake, but they didn't like get up and do anything about it. They just kind of stayed in bed with the baby. And it actually wasn't the sounds that the 4 and 6-year-old Lily and Jack were making that woke them up. It was eventually the silence. Around 10 a.m., they realized the house was dead quiet. And they're like, whoa, like, where are the other two kids? They jumped out of bed, ran out into the living room and the kitchen. Neither kid was there. And immediately, it seems, panic set in. The stepfather, Daniel, ran out of the house, got in the car, and started cruising the neighborhood looking for where the children could be. And pretty much immediately, the mother called 911. And that's at about 10 a.m. And that's like really the facts of the actual moment that they realize the kids are missing. But as a mother of a 16-year-old, can you relate to this lazing around in bed with your baby?
See, like I've already, like, this is a very different experience than my experience. Now, I know that parenthood is different for everyone and no two babies are the same, but my kid does not sleep that late. But who knows, theirs might have been up at 4 or 5 a.m. and now has fallen back asleep. But also just like both parents are sleeping and kind of in and out of sleep. And there's two other kids. I don't know. It's just, it's weird to me, but I wasn't there. So it's different than my experience. I just, like, if I had two other kids roaming around, I'd send my husband. or get up myself. I get postpartum can be crazy, but I don't know. Both of you were snoozing
Mhm.
till 10 a.m. That's like half your day.
Yeah, that's true. The way I saw it more so was, in my case anyway, in my family and in my house, my kids wouldn't have stayed out there. They would have come in the room and like got one of us up to like, come make us breakfast, come do this, come set this up. Like it would have been hard to just ignore my kids and leave them out there.
Right.
And yeah, 10 a.m. to people without young children, that may seem like it's the morning, but when you have young children, 10 a.m., like you've done so much stuff by that point of the day. So
You've lived an entire lifetime by 10 a.m.
that's a good way to put it. But regardless, in this case, that is the story that has been told. As far as where the children are, how they could have gotten out of the house, the stepfather Daniel, he's the one who has gave the most information to the media. So a lot of what we, the public, know comes from him. What he had said is that the trailer had a sliding door, like kind of like a patio door, and he said for whatever reason the door was like silent. You could slide it open and it just didn't make a sound, and it always kind of concerned him. So his thought when the kids weren't in the house is that they must have just slid that open and walked out, and from the bedroom he or the children's mother wouldn't have heard this door slide open and shut. So the belief from the very beginning, and the belief that the searchers appear to be going on to this day, is that throughout that morning, the children opened the door, walked out, and went into either towards the street in front or into the woods in the backyard. And as far as physical evidence, the only thing found at this point was a single boot print about 3 meters from the home, I believe in the driveway. So it's very little in terms of physical evidence, like nothing that tells you a story. And we don't know much about this boot print, so I don't know if it's a boot print in mud or if it's something fresh, like a boot print that disturbed the morning dew in the grass. So obviously it was, from the last couple hours or whatnot.
Right. Well, and I feel like the parents are going to get a ton of flack about this sliding door thing, and probably already have.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do need to remember is that this is essentially an acreage, yes?
Yeah.
So we can only assume, and that's all I'm doing is assuming because I don't actually know, the kids going in and out and playing outside probably isn't uncommon. Yeah, I think the parents are going to be judged heavily for not being on high alert and not hearing the door. But
the big mistake you're making there is saying are going to be judged heavily. It's already happening. People are like, it's fair to say like people are coming after them with heavy accusations. But a few of the things you said there, I can maybe elaborate on. One is it's been said that these children generally don't play outside without one of the adults.
Oh.
So that wouldn't be a normal thing for them to do. And on Friday morning when this all happened, the weather wasn't great. It was a chilly day. It would have been like 6 degrees, heavy overcast. It wasn't raining at the time, but it would have been later in that day. It wasn't nice weather. Okay. What the stepfather said is these children, if they were outside, their motivation would be getting back inside the house because they didn't like to be wet.
Aw. Okay. Well,
or cold.
I know nothing apparently.
Well, I've been hanging off of so much of this, and I've gone through every news report I could find where either the children's mother or their stepfather said something, and I'm just doing my best to understand it because to me, I don't want to say like, there's hijinks at play here, but as I go through the story, I do find it doesn't make a lot of sense, and I can't put myself in the position to be making these choices. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk with you about it, is maybe we can make it make sense as we go. Getting back to the timeline, 10 a.m., they get out of bed because the house is silent. The children are nowhere to be found. The stepfather, Daniel, runs outside, jumps in his car, and he's driving around dirt roads. He's looking in culverts, looking anywhere that these kids could be, not finding anything. He eventually brings his car home, and he's just running through the woods, shouting at the top of his lungs. Meanwhile, the mother's calling 911. And it's like this panicked search while waiting for police to respond. The police do respond pretty quickly. It's the RCMP. They begin their formal search. It's taken seriously right from the beginning. When you have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old unaccounted for, the clock is ticking for sundown because you got to get these kids back home before it gets dark. They send out what's called a vulnerable person alert, which is a type of like an emergency alert that gets sent to everybody's, phones. And I think it plays on the radio, but only in a localized area. I'll read it to you because this is how most people would have learned what was happening. It says, missing vulnerable people, Lily and Jack Sullivan of Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia. The Nova Scotia RCMP is asking for the public's assistance in locating 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack. They were last seen, and we're going to come back to this. They were last seen on May 1st on Garlock Road in Lansdowne Station, Pictou County. Lily has shoulder-length light brown hair with bangs. She might be wearing a pink sweater, pink pants, and pink boots. Jack has short blondish hair. He's wearing blue dinosaur boots. Anyone with information is asked to call the police at 902-485-4333. So first thing about this alert, when this gets sent out, it's just that local area, but it says last seen on May 1st, which would have been Thursday night. So when I saw that, I'm like, is there some kind of a mistake with, like, did they put the wrong date in the emergency alert? But it seems like there's some debate about when the children were last seen. Because remember Friday morning, as they're lounging in bed, they can kind of, the stepfather and the mother, they hear the kids in the other room. But initially it said like they didn't actually lay eyes on the kids. I believe that was what the mother had said initially. But it was actually the stepfather said that they didn't see the son, Jack, but Lily came in and out of the bedroom a few times. So they did see her that morning. So there's still like a little question about when these kids were actually last seen. Was it Thursday night before bed or was it Friday morning? But regardless, I guess, whether you saw them or you hear them playing in the other room, I guess maybe it's about the same.
I don't know. The fact that neither parent got up when two of their other children got up still is kind of baffling me. You
want to hear something else before we go further? Another thing that's baffling me, and this is something that was just confirmed in the media this evening, is that these children, if you want to talk about when they were last seen, they weren't in school the entire week. They wouldn't have been in school Friday either. We had school last week, of course, in Nova Scotia. These children missed a full week of school, and the only reason I know why is it said that Jack, who was in what's called pre-primary, he had a cough, so he wasn't going to school Friday. But I couldn't tell why they weren't in school all week. And I just know myself, having raised 2 kids, I've never had my kids so sick they missed an entire week of school. But to me, that just tells me that, or it makes me feel that something unusual was going on within the family or within the house that led to the kids being home sick all week or home from school all week. And I also think on top of that, if I had a 16-month-old, my 2 older kids would need to be damn sick for me to say like, okay, you can stay home while I raise the baby. Like I would want them going to school.
Right. Have there been any other like family members or neighbors that have confirmed any sort of sighting of them throughout the week?
When exactly were they last seen by the parents, and when were they last seen by anyone other than the parents?
That's my question as well.
We don't know, but when we follow along with how the search is being run, I think it's going to show us that the RCMP certainly believes the story that is being told that the children simply wandered off. That seems to be all the public messages they're giving. And the search has been relentless and nonstop. Day and night, they have been searching an ever-growing and expanding area around this home with, and when I say searching, I don't mean like a couple people with flashlights. This is, I think, is the heaviest search and rescue operation I have ever seen in Nova Scotia. There's well over 100 people, helicopters in the air, search dogs, they have drones, they have infrared cameras. they've asked the community to not get involved because people online, they want to start civilian searches and just go down there and help. But what they're actually doing, like a part of their search, for one, it's very organized and everything's, grids that they're tackling and going about it very methodically. But what they're doing is they're using infrared cameras. So a drone or a helicopter will spot like a heat signature in the woods, which, it could be a deer or a fox, or it could be a little kid. And they're deploying kind of search teams to just try to find anything in the woods. But after now 4 days of searching, the only other piece of information other than the footprint about 3 meters from the house is there was another footprint that was found in the woods that may or may not be connected to this case. And it may or may not even be a footprint. They believe they found a small footprint a good distance away from the home. And that has led to them further expanding the search area to a pretty large area. They actually sent a separate vulnerable person. I mentioned that vulnerable person alert. They sent another one on the second day on Saturday afternoon because of the area that this other possible footprint was found would make it so that these children are possibly in other communities. So they sent another alert so people in these neighboring communities would be aware of what's happening. But it's kind of irrelevant at this point because everybody in Nova Scotia knows about this. Where this all brings me is when you think of a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, I just like, even my 7-year-old, I have to drag them if I'm going on a 25-minute walk. I couldn't imagine a 4-year-old traveling kilometers in the woods.
And so quickly.
I don't see it. Yeah, I cannot see it.
I know you haven't like been where this took place, but and I'm sure someone's already looked into this, but is there any bodies of water near?
There's bodies of water. There's other like abandoned buildings. There's a lot of spots that you could get that you could end up, and that's a part of the reason why when people are saying like we want to search, can we go there and be volunteer searchers? Up until now, what the RCMP and the search and rescue teams are asking people to do is just search your own property, and if you want to do something nice, bring the searchers hot coffee and donuts, but don't get involved. That's kind of where it's at. But there are, when you look at the expanded search area that they're using right now, there are several bodies of water, and and God forbid that it took that something like that happened, but it is a possibility. But they
well, and also a few months ago, we covered a case from, I can't remember, somewhere in Nova Scotia, but it's about the man that just like disappeared from the hospital. Mm-hmm. His name's escaping me right now.
Lyndon Fuller.
Thank you, Lyndon Fuller. But after that episode was released, people were commenting about a bog, and I didn't know what a bog was. Are there bogs around this area? I had no idea what that was.
Yeah, a bog is just like a swampy area. There would be plenty, and this time of year when not long since a lot of the snow melted and stuff, and it's been rainy quite a bit yet. April showers bring May flowers. That whole saying. There'd be a lot of boggy, swampy, uncomfortable areas to walk through, especially for a kid who's not dressed for the weather. Like rain boots are way different than waist-high boots that an adult would wear trucking, that the search teams are wearing,
Right.
So there are plenty. But the thing is that the search response is so heavy that I still, in my mind, if these kids weren't found within a day or two, I doubt that they're around there, because this is, like well over 100 people that are professionals from across the province in an organized search, assisted by technology, search dogs, drones, helicopters, infrared cameras. I just feel like if these two children, a 4 and a 6-year-old, walked out of the home wearing rain boots, I don't see there any possibility that they're more than at most 2 kilometers away or something like that. I can't imagine it.
Right. Well, and I think that's why there's so much speculation on the parents because
Mm-hmm.
of that. But, and I always do this myself, I forget how unforgiving the elements are.
Mm-hmm.
And it just reminds me of a case from, what year is it? about 3 years ago, 2022, in Saskatchewan. A young boy named Frank Young, he was 5 years old, went missing from the Red Earth Cree Nation. I can't remember if you and I talked about him, but same kind of deal. He just basically wandered off from his house one afternoon, and search parties started immediately, like infrared helicopters, and people were convinced that like he had to have been abducted because he wasn't found right away. But 81 days later, he was found in a river, which was very close to where he went missing. So it's like, I don't know. It's so hard to say.
That's one other difference, though, or one major difference between this story and a lot of the other missing persons cases we would have discussed or we would have followed, is in this case, there's two kids as well. So if there was, like, if some accidental horrific thing, like one of them ended up in the body of water, it would need to be a scenario where both of them end up in it for them to disappear. But what we didn't do, and I should get into this, is this is another thing that's often discussed online, is we do have a basic description of what the children were wearing. And a lot of people will say, you know, how could the parents possibly know what the kids were last seen wearing if the parents were in the bedroom and, you know, and maybe did or did not see them that morning? As a parent, I know that I could use my powers of deduction to possibly figure out what my kid was wearing if he's not in the house with me. But what it's been said is that the 6-year-old Lily was dressed all in pink and likely wearing a white backpack with a strawberry pattern on it. So it seemed like whatever the design was strawberries. 4-year-old Jack is said to be likely wearing brown pants, a brown sweater, and a pair of rain boots. A lot of people are criticizing the statements related to how they're last dressed based on, you know, the vague description of when they were last seen. But I think it's likely the explanation for how they can figure out what they're wearing is, you know, daughter's not there, nor is her backpack. Therefore, she likely has her backpack with her. Right.
And like kids, especially kids in general, they just like to wear their backpacks and bags and whatever.
Yeah, but either way, I think what they're wearing, like at this point in Nova Scotia, if someone sees a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old looking like they just stumbled out of the woods, they're going to know right away who it is. So it's not. I think that the physical description of their clothing maybe isn't that important for the public. Much more important for the searchers, though, who find a rain boot or a brown sweater or something. But anyway, that's just something that there's been a lot of discussion about it. But we've already covered kind of the basics of the disappearance and the search. That has really continued day and night. The search has gone on and on without end, with Nova Scotians and everyone following the story around the world waiting for good news that has yet to come. And we're recording this Monday night. It's just going on 10 o'clock here. And as I look at the window behind me, it's dark out, and that bothers me because I know these two children, if they're out there, it's dark where they are now for the 4th night in a row, and that is just horrific. There's a lot to talk about in terms of unanswered questions and just talking points in this case. So let's have a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get into everything else there is to say about this case outside of the timeline. So Madeline, we talked about the vulnerable persons alerts or the emergency alerts being sent out, but a big question that's being asked online is, why has there not been what people refer to as an Amber Alert, which is a much more powerful version of an alert that provides much more information and a more consistent stream of information to the public? People, including these children's stepfather and many members of the community, expect or believe an Amber Alert should have been sent out. But I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand the difference between an Amber Alert and an emergency alert. I did some research on it, but before I tell you what I learned from Googling, do you know why there wouldn't be an Amber Alert in this case?
I know lots about Amber Alerts, so yes, I do.
Okay, good. Take us to school.
So for there to be an official Amber Alert released, or called, whatever. The police have to believe that the child was abducted. They need something to identify, like a make and color of a car, a license plate, and the child. They do have to be under 18 as a rule. An Amber Alert will be called for an adult that is like vulnerable, like has a disability or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you just rattled off my notes. Basically, it's a kid or a vulnerable adult. There's evidence that the child has been abducted, and not only abducted, but that they're in harm's way. And there needs to be enough information to identify a suspect, like a make, model, year of vehicle or something of that nature. So in this case, people hearing this story, it may not make sense, or they're not finding the kids after days of searching. So a lot of people are like, so it's obviously an abduction. There should be an Amber Alert. That's not the way. That's not the way it works. But that said, I think we both understand, and we don't need to beat a dead horse as to why there wouldn't be an Amber Alert or why this doesn't qualify. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say, in my opinion, these children wander off. I believe they would have been found by now. I'm beginning to think that there may be something more foul happening, something more serious than a child wandering off. That I'm starting to suspect that, and I hadn't all weekend. I've been following this story thinking any day now I'm going to tune in, and there's going to be tune into the news, and there's going to be a video of these children getting in a helicopter and being rescued. As time passed and that doesn't happen, I'm just struggling to think of these kids getting far enough away to not be found. And I should also say, this time of year, it's the beginning of May, trees in Nova Scotia, they're not all grown in yet. There's like, it's just maybe some buds on the trees, but it's still pretty open. So it's kind of the ideal time to find someone missing in the woods, because there's not thick foliage for them to get lost in. The woods, for the most part, are still pretty clear. In 3 weeks' time, it's going to be a different story. But right now, this time of year is like the ideal searching time. In fact, a lot of missing persons cases, if there is going to be a search, they're going to plan it for this time of year before, after the snow is gone, but before the leaves are on the trees. And that's kind of played into my belief that they would have found these kids by now. What's your thought on that?
It's hard to say, because none of this makes sense. Like you said, they should have been found. They're not going to get that far that fast, which it begs the question, are they not in the area, and how did they get away from the area? But so here's my question to you. Let's say someone took them. The odds of someone that they knew taking them are a lot more than a stranger abduction. Both happen, absolutely. Like, I'm not going to rule out just a random abduction, but I'm just hoping that their biological grandfather came and took them. And they're safe and they're happy, and they don't know any different.
And just for the record, for you say biological grandfather, just as an example of someone close to them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just speculating here. Because I sure hope a stranger didn't snatch them up.
Yeah. Well, a stranger abduction is incredibly rare.
But they do happen.
And probably it does happen, but where this takes place, these people live in the middle of nowhere. Like, this isn't like they're roaming around downtown Toronto or Vancouver or something.
Right.
I think the idea of a stranger abduction happening in, Pictou County, Nova Scotia, it's I think it would be statistically improbable that could happen.
That timing would just have to be a perfect storm.
Exactly.
For that to,
Exactly. But that said, the parents don't seem to know exactly what was happening in the house. So who's to say someone didn't, come up to the house or something of that nature? Because it's just, the belief is that these kids probably slid out that quiet patio door. We don't know. No one knows for sure. But that's an abduction is, it is possible, but I think unlikely. And I think the RCMP seems to at least be acting on the belief that these kids wandered off, because it is an all hands on deck, relentless search. And they've said, we're not giving up till we find these kids. And they've held true to that. And you know, when you hear of a major ground search like this, usually after a day or two, they start scaling it back. They haven't in this case. They're going as if those kids are out there.
Well, now I'm thinking. Now
Mhm.
you have me thinking. So you said that the parents said like they don't ever wander outside, they don't play outside, and it wasn't nice out. And they left fairly quietly. In my experience, kids are never quiet. Like even if they try and be quiet, they whisper loud, for God's sakes.
No, I know.
I'm just wondering if someone was outside that caught their attention and they were like, let's go outside. Let's go to this person, or let's go check this out, because they like, why would they have wandered if they don't normally
That's
play
a good
outside?
point. But although the RCMP and the searchers seem to be going on the belief that these kids wandered away, the stepfather of these children has gone public more than once with his belief that they need to shut down borders, they need more resources searching, and they need to take this in an altogether different route. I'm going to play a short clip of the children's stepfather, Daniel, speaking to Global News, where he makes it clear how serious of a concern he has that these kids may be abducted or being taken out of province. I'm going to play his clip and see if this changes how you feel about it. Here it comes.
We were searching. We covered everywhere possible. Even in the first day we did. Even with me running through the woods, I was ahead of the helicopters and ahead of the drones and stuff like that. Screaming as loud as I can, and just until my throat hurt. Running through water that was up to my waist. And as soon as I got back, I wasn't allowed back in the woods until a man dressed in military outfit said I could go back into the woods.
4 days into the search for his missing stepkids, Lily and Jack Sullivan, Daniel Martel is pleading with the public to keep their eyes peeled. But he has begun to lose hope they are anywhere in the vicinity.
I hate being wet and cold, so they immediately would have came right back into the house. The only two prints are right beside the house facing the road, and then that's it.
Martel wants the search to be extended to include provincial borders in case the children were abducted, a reality he says is becoming more and more likely.
Post any officers they can get at the New Brunswick border, PI border, and get them at every airport possible.
Martel confirmed that when the two children went missing from the home behind me, Lily was wearing a pink shirt and pink rain boots. She was also carrying a white backpack with strawberries on it. Martel says although he didn't see Jack that morning, he is believed to be wearing a brown shirt, brown pants with a pull-up diaper on underneath, and blue rain boots with dinosaurs on them. He also refuted the claim that the two children are nonverbal, saying while they are on the autism spectrum, they are quite trusting and say hi to everyone. According to Martel, his side of the family are currently the only ones at ground zero after Lily and Jack's mother left the county Saturday. But still, he remains, begging anyone with answers to come forward and bring his children home safe.
Anybody who has any information, or you think you've seen something or hear something, or any messages from friends about hearing something, just contact your local police services. Anything, guys, anything.
It's he makes a lot of good points, and I think he feels, or his belief seems to be switching almost the way mine does, is it's abduction seems more and more likely as time goes by. But I noticed you raise an eyebrow when the narrator in that news clip said the mother has left the county, which is like the part of the province. From what I understand, and this is something else we should talk about, there's been rumors online that I've seen about a breakdown of the relationship between Daniel and the children's mother happening over the weekend while the search was happening. And I was kind of chalking that up to like, maybe, given all the media coverage, maybe they were upping the privacy settings on their Facebook accounts and stuff. And in the process of doing that, maybe hid their relationship status on Facebook. And maybe the prying eyes on Facebook maybe thought that implied that they were breaking up or something. So I kind of dismissed this idea that there was a breakdown of the relationship. But what Daniel said in that news clip is that over the weekend, she left the home and left that part of the province, I believe, to go with family in another part of the province, which I thought, that's kind of unusual. But then another article that I read that had a text interview with Daniel, what he said is the same thing, but he took it a step further and said, and she blocked me on social media. So it seems like they're not even in contact with each other anymore. So there is a high probability that in the middle of all of this, their relationship may have broken down. And saying that, I don't know what kind of, how difficult it would be to go through something like this together. But just the idea of breaking up in the middle of it is pretty unexpected.
Right. My first red flag is, how can your kids go missing and then you go to a different part of the province?
Yeah, like I feel like
I'm not understanding.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I would understand what it would be like to be in that position, but if I try to imagine what I would be doing, I feel like I would stay where the kids were last seen, and my family from the other part of the province would come to me.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I don't know. And the whole so within hours, it seems this relationship deteriorated because of the missing children, I'm assuming. But how do you go from laying in bed together all morning to your relationship completely deteriorating?
Mm-hmm.
The math ain't mathin'.
Yeah, well, I could, just to play like devil's advocate or try to think of a way that it could happen. I'm sure there's a lot of either feeling guilty or maybe putting blame on each other for something that happened that morning. And maybe I could just imagine a heated argument where someone says something they didn't necessarily mean in the heat of the moment.
That's true.
And there's also a 16-month-old baby in the middle of this. So maybe she thought, I can't be out in the woods searching, leave that to search and rescue. I'm going to go with my family. I'm going to just focus on my 16-month-old baby and keep them safe. And Daniel, if you want to stay behind and talk to the media and hang around while they're searching, power to you. I could maybe see that, but it just, that's me trying to make sense of it, not me saying what I think I would do.
Right. And we can't say what we would do because we don't actually know.
Thank God. And that's what I don't like about these stories is you're forced to kind of think of how you would handle it. And I really don't know how I would handle it. But it's people online, like a lot of people online are pointing fingers towards both Daniel and the child's mother. And I don't know if I would go that far because it's too early to say yet. But all I can say is I don't feel like they wandered away because I believe they'd be found. But then again, there are cases like the story of Dylan Eeler in Truro, which I've covered on the show, and I know you know that story. He's said to have wandered away from his grandmother's backyard years ago. He was never found again. But again, that's one individual, and he was 3.
I was just gonna say, I wonder if we're not getting the correct timeline. And perhaps there was a couple more hours in the mix.
Yeah, that's possible.
Like,
There's
I don't know.
There's a lot of things that I feel like we don't have the full story of, like exactly when they were last seen by the parents or anyone other than the parents. I would really like to know that. A better description of what they were wearing. I think if you read 5 different articles, there'll be it's kind of described in different ways. I actually thought up until this morning that Jack just had a pull-up diaper and rain boots on. It wasn't until an article today that I read that described him also being dressed in brown. Everything was just making reference to this pull-up diaper. And I was thinking, there's no way a 4-year-old has a pull-up diaper on only in the woods for 4 days. But turns out that was just kind of like a misunderstanding that wasn't corrected until today. But I just feel like there needs to be like a communication from the RCMP. Like, here are the facts that we know. But then in saying that, I also think, why does the public deserve to know this stuff? But at this point, 2 missing kids, everybody wants to know anything they can to try to make sense of it, to try to, maybe it makes some people feel better to be like, this could never happen to me because I would never, blank, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But It's just a heartbreaking story. I hate it, and I hate that this has gone on for so long. Like I've been very rarely is there something in the news that's just eating away at me, and this has been it. I laid in bed last night just thinking of how I, as a 4 or 6 year old, would be able to survive in the woods, where I would get fresh water, how I could find food, how I would deal with trying to sleep. It's been rainy the last like 3 days. It's been cold and rainy. There's not, a bunch of apples on trees and blueberries growing, so I don't know what they're going to eat. And they're in the middle of rural Nova Scotia where there would be dangerous animals roaming around at night. And who would want to be walking through the woods in rain boots? I guess it's better than sneakers,
Right.
but this is a horror story, I think. And it doesn't seem to have an end in sight. If anything, it seems like it's going to get worse over the coming days.
The longer it goes on, the less hope we have of a happy ending.
Mhm.
It's just so unfortunate
Let's
that. Ugh.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but
No, it's
let's
okay.
quickly hear from the children's mother. As I said from the beginning, the majority of public statements made were from the child's stepfather, but shortly after the disappearance, one of the earliest news reports included a brief interview with Malaya, the mother, where she expressed her sorrow and her pain, waiting for her children to be found. Let's listen to her.
I'm just staying as hopeful as possible. I want them home. I want to hold them. And I want them home.
Very short, but I just think maybe I think I'm a better like psychologist than I am, but I just feel like I can hear pain in her voice. I can hear pain in Daniel's voice and panic in his voice, but I'm hearing him speak more. But
Well, and we also, in our hearts, do not want to believe that parents could do something so awful to their own children.
mhm.
So,
Yeah. Is it
yeah.
wrong to even suggest that or even bring that up? Or is that something like I feel like if you go on Facebook or any social media and read about this case, that's what people are saying. They're trying to decide if that's what happened or not. So I don't know. I don't think it's like it's wrong to even approach that topic. But for me, I will say I don't see anything in either of them that makes me think that they're guilty of something. And
Right.
I could never understand how it would feel to be living with this. So that way and because of that, I can't judge their actions in a way where I'm like, oh, there's definitely, no one in their right mind would do this. I don't know how I would ever act in that situation. If something happened to my kids, because it wouldn't be
No.
the Jordan that's sitting here talking. It wouldn't be me that's handling it. It would be this just like torn apart, exploded version of me. And
Well, and when you're experiencing something so traumatic and like you don't know how you're going to act. I compare it to like when years ago when Fort McMurray was on fire, I came across an article of so people were packing in a hurry, right? Their homes were burning down, and people were posting pictures of funny things that they packed in a hurry. Like someone threw a pack of like craft singles into their luggage. Like they just panicked, right? You grab weird stuff and I kind of compare it to that. Like
yeah.
you don't know how you're going to react with
Mhm.
when something this terrible happens.
How long do you think it's reasonable for this search to continue at this level? We're now 4 days in.
I'd say another 10 days at least.
Okay, that's being generous because I did some
Yeah.
searching for cases of this time of year, children surviving in woods and surviving in the woods. And some of the more notable cases would be 2 days. One was a 5 day. A kid survived for 5 days, but that was a bit of an older kid. But it seems like it's unusual, highly unusual for a kid to be found safe 4 days in or longer than that. But I think at this point we're waiting on a miracle.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely.
Maybe there's an abandoned building or like a hunter's cabin or something, and the
Yeah.
children just stumbled upon it. And maybe because they're in a building, the infrared cameras that are on these drones and these helicopters just aren't picking the kids up. And maybe they just
Oh,
haven't,
maybe.
perhaps it's something like that. But that seems like it would be a
But time is
strategic.
still running out.
Time is still running out because you need food and
Yeah.
water,
Right.
fresh water. But I'm also thinking like the idea of like hunkering down in this hunter's cabin would be like a strategic thought that I don't think of a 4 or a 6-year-old would be able to do. I feel like a 4 or a 6-year-old would be panicking.
And not for 4 days. Like maybe the first night they, would seek shelter in a random abandoned cabin, but then they'd go back out at some point. So
This is an awful story, and this is unusual for us here on Nighttime to cover something that is this breaking and developing. Likely by the time this episode comes out, there will be significant developments, and I really hope we don't have to release this episode because it's out of date, because these two children were found safe and there's no story to discuss anymore. But I think if listeners of Nighttime are hearing this, that's not good news.
no, not at all. I was hoping that this recording would have been kiboshed like an hour before we started.
Let's end on that note. But I feel like, I just want to send positive vibes to everybody affected by this, because it's something happening to children. It's just, I wish we lived in a world where things like this just couldn't happen. But
Well,
they
and
do
this
far
is
too
going
often.
to this is going to affect a lot more than just the family too. It's going to affect the whole community and the whole province. Like it's, yeah.
I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Nighttime. Before I end here, I want to send positive vibes to everyone affected by this case. I also want to send a sincere thank you to everyone searching for Jack and Lily. It's truly a nightmare scenario, and I think everyone out there feels the same way I do. When a kid goes missing, everything else takes second priority. I also would like to caution people to double, if not triple, vet every piece of information that they come across online. A case like this can bring out the best and the worst in people, and some of the rumors I've come across are about as horrific as they are illogical, and that won't do anyone any good. So let's try to stick to the facts. I think it's quite obvious, but this is a quickly developing story, and a lot more is probably about to surface. I'm going to do my best to provide update episodes as these developments take place. But that said, if anyone close to the story would like to speak with me, please get in touch and we can make that happen. Now, with all that said, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before we part, I have a few thanks to pass out. A big thanks to Monty, Datta, who contributes the music for this show, and Linz from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides my intro and outro voiceovers. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. On the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Blaze, Eileen, and George, we appreciate you. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help us out here in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple bucks a month, and that money funds the creation of the show. But the premium feed will also give you the show 2 days early, give it to you ad-free, and give you access to a back catalog of episodes. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know when they should listen. Your support is very much appreciated. Now, with that said, until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and keep Lily and Jack in your thoughts. They need all the help they can get.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.